For 6 years, the office on the 12th floor had been more than just a workspace, it was a second home. The familiar rhythm of elevator dings, the hum of monitors, and the faint scent of burnt coffee from the break room had become part of my bloodstream. I was proud of where I worked, Clarion Systems, a mid-sized tech company that had grown from a cramped startup to a sleek, open-plan firm that people in the industry were finally taking seriously. Our CEO, Ethan Marwood, liked to call us the quiet disruptors. We weren't flashy like the Silicon Valley darlings, but our software solutions for logistics had quietly taken over entire sectors. By the end of that year, Clarion had caught the attention of a global conglomerate preparing to acquire us for $500 million. The announcement sent ripples through every department. Overnight, the energy shifted, meetings doubled, NDAs were signed, and every conversation suddenly felt heavier. Measured, still, beneath the surface excitement. There was something that didn't sit right with me. As a senior financial analyst, I'd been part of nearly every audit Clarion ever conducted. I knew our numbers like I knew my own handwriting. Yet the figures being circulated in the pre-acquisition reports glowed a little too perfectly. Growth projections that had once hovered around modest, realistic percentages now spiked upward in clean, exponential curves. Revenues that should have taken years to achieve were suddenly confirmed. When I asked about it in a budget review meeting, the CFO, Denise Calder, smiled a little too calmly. "Don't worry, we've adjusted for pre-merger optimism," she said. "The buyer expects a certain story, let's make sure we tell it right." Her tone was light, but the implication was sharp. Stop asking questions. That week, I started noticing smaller things too. Access restrictions on old financial folders. Memos tagged for executive review only. Colleagues whispering in the hallways after hours. I told myself it was just acquisition tension, people protecting information in a volatile deal. But part of me felt like we weren't just protecting data. We were hiding it. Still, I kept my head down. Everyone did. We'd worked too hard for this moment, and after years of 70-hour weeks and last-minute deadlines, the promise of stability stock options, bonuses, maybe even a title change felt within reach. The idea of questioning that felt almost disloyal. The company culture fed on that loyalty. Every Friday, Ethan would deliver his fire-up speech over espresso shots and playlists of upbeat pop hits. "We built this with sweat and sacrifice," he'd say, pacing in his tailored suit. "Now it's time to reap what we've sown." And everyone would clap. Even me, though something inside me had started to dull one evening. As I walked through the office long after everyone had gone, the floor felt eerily silent. The city lights glowed against the glass, reflecting rows of empty desks and half-drunk mugs. On my monitor, the quarterly report spreadsheet flickered open columns of numbers I'd spent months refining. Then I saw it, an unapproved adjustment in the revenue cell for a key account, the number inflated by almost 20%. No note, no initials, just changed. I stared at it for a long time, cursor blinking beside the falsified figure. Then I did something I now recognize as the first step toward everything that followed. I saved a copy to a personal drive. The next morning, the office was buzzing again. HR circulated memos about transition planning. Upper management floated between meetings in expensive suits. People were talking about vacations, new roles, futures. But beneath all that, there was a quiet tension I couldn't name. At the time, I thought the unease was about the merger. I didn't yet realize that in a matter of days, my name would be erased from the system, my email deactivated, and my security badge denied at the turnstile. Back then, it just felt like another day at Clarion Systems, a calm, ordinary day before the cut. The morning it happened began like any other. The office was unusually quiet, but that wasn't new. Ever since the acquisition talks began, people moved through the halls like ghosts smiling from meetings, whispering in private. Everyone was waiting for news. Who would stay, who would go, and who would vanish quietly between spreadsheets and polite handshakes. I arrived early as always. The security guard nodded as I flashed my badge, though his expression lingered for a second longer than usual. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I looked more tired than I felt. I had spent half the night reviewing old data logs again, trying to make sense of the mysterious revenue changes I'd discovered. By 9 a.m., my inbox pinged. A calendar invite from HR. Subject: quick check-in, 9:30 a.m., conference room 4B. No agenda. No context. I felt a small knot twist in my stomach. Quick check-ins were never quick and never good. When I walked into the conference room, the air was thick with rehearsed sympathy. Denise, the CFO, sat at one end of the table. Next to her was Kara from HR, smiling too softly like someone trying to sell calm in a burning building. "Thanks for coming in, Alex," Kara began. "We know you've been a key part of Clarion's growth, and we truly appreciate everything you've contributed." That word contributed echoed in my head. Past tense. "As part of the post-acquisition restructuring," Denise continued, glancing briefly at her notes, "your role is being dissolved. Effective immediately." It was like she'd said it in another language. My brain registered the words, but my body refused to. I stared at her, searching for some mistake in the tone, a flicker of hesitation that meant this wasn't final. "Effective immediately?" I repeated, the words dry in my mouth. "Yes," Kara said gently. "Your severance package has been processed, and IT will assist with your transition." Transition. That word again, soft, vague, bloodless. I looked around the room. At the woman I'd worked beside for 6 years, the same woman who once told me, "You're the backbone of our finance team." Now she couldn't even meet my eyes. "Can I at least ask why?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Denise cleared her throat. "This isn't performance-related," she said quickly. "It's a structural realignment." "Nothing personal?" "Nothing personal." The phrase hit harder than any insult could. Outside the conference room, I saw 2 IT techs already rolling past with sealed boxes. I realized they were clearing desks in my team section. My section, when I returned to my workstation, my monitor had already gone black. Access denied. My emails gone. My nameplate missing. The speed of it was surgical, as if they had rehearsed this moment long before I walked in. Coworkers avoided eye contact. A few sent me quick messages. "I'm so sorry. This is insane. Call me later." But no one dared speak out loud. The acquisition was still fragile, and loyalty to the new bosses outweighed sympathy for the fallen Dot as I packed the last of my things, a family photo, a half-empty notebook, a mug with the words, "Trust the process." I caught sight of the executives walking into a closed meeting room. They were laughing. Glass walls separated us, but I could still hear fragments of their conversation. Bonuses, mergers, celebrations, the contrast burned. I had given them weekends, late nights, birthdays missed. Now I was just noise removed from the system. Downstairs, I handed my security badge to the guard. He looked at me for a long second, then said softly, "You didn't deserve this." Outside, the October wind hit my face like reality itself. My phone buzzed, an automated email confirming my final paycheck and NDA agreement. I stared at it, thumb hovering over accept, but something in me refused. For years I'd been silent, compliant, loyal. And this was how it ended, deleted with a polite email and a plastic smile. I walked away from the glass tower of Clarion Systems for the last time. But even as I did, a strange calm settled in my chest. The company had erased me. Yes, but they had also made one mistake. They thought they'd deleted my access completely. They hadn't. For the first 2 days after the layoff, I couldn't do much of anything. I moved through my apartment like someone walking underwater, slow, heavy, half awake. My inbox was gone, my calendar cleared, my routines erased. I had always measured my life by deadlines, deliverables, and fiscal quarters. Without them, time felt shapeless. Friends texted, "You'll bounce back. Everything happens for a reason." But I wasn't looking for reasons. I wanted answers. The severance email had promised access to archived personal documents for 48 hours. On the third night, sleepless and restless, I logged into my old work account one last time. Surprisingly, it still worked. My heart kicked up. Maybe IT had missed something, or maybe the deletion queue hadn't processed yet. Either way, I had a window. I told myself I only wanted to retrieve personal files, tax documents. pay slips, and a few old reports for my portfolio. But once inside the system, habit took over. My fingers moved with muscle memory, navigating through the company's shared drives and finance logs, and that's when I saw it folders I'd never had access to before, now strangely unprotected. Their names were simple, almost bland. Pre-AKI reports, Val Edge drafts, legacy accounts. The kind of titles designed to hide in plain sight. I opened the first one. Inside were spreadsheets that made my stomach twist. Each file listed client contracts, revenue streams, and growth projections, numbers I knew by heart. But here they'd been changed. Accounts that were supposed to be dormant were suddenly reactivated. Payments that never existed were listed as confirmed. It was subtle, almost elegant, like a magician's sleight of hand, except with millions of dollars in one document. I recognized my own initials in the metadata. My old report edited, overwritten. Someone had used my work as the foundation for false entries, forging my digital signature in the audit trail. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was disbelief. I checked timestamps, cross-referenced logs, and tried to convince myself it was a glitch. But the deeper I went, the clearer it became. The fraud wasn't an accident, it was engineered. The next folder, Val Edge drafts, contained side-by-side comparisons of real and optimized financial data. The optimized versions, marked with a casual final approved, were the ones shared with the acquiring company. It hit me then. Clarion hadn't just exaggerated its success. It had built an entire false empire, brick by brick, on doctored spreadsheets and phantom clients. $500 million. That was the selling price. $500 million built on lies. I sat there, staring at the screen, the glow of the monitor washing my apartment in cold light. The city outside buzzed with distant traffic, but inside time felt suspended. For years I'd believed I worked for something real, something we built together. But the truth was, while I was busy crunching numbers late into the night, the people at the top were crafting illusions out of them. I downloaded everything. Every file, every note, every discrepancy. My hands shook as the progress bar crawled forward 5%, 17%, 42%. It felt wrong, dangerous even, but some instinct told me this wasn't just about losing my job anymore. This was about why. When the final file finished saving, I logged out and unplugged my laptop. My pulse wouldn't slow down. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared at my reflection in the window. Outside, Clarion's tower shimmered faintly in the distance, its windows reflecting the city lights like nothing had ever happened, but I knew better now. The calm surface was an illusion beneath it. Something rotten was pulsing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw numbers, rows and rows of falsified data. The zeros turning into holes that pulled everything down. I told myself I'd stop there, that I'd let it go. But deep down, I already knew I wouldn't, because now I had proof. And proof demands to be used. For a few days, I did nothing with the files. I told myself I needed time to think, to process. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid. Every time I opened my laptop, the folder sat there on my desktop like a ticking bomb, its name disguised as something harmless. Freelance Taxes 2021. I'd renamed it that night, right after downloading everything, as if hiding the truth under an innocent label could make it less real. But fear doesn't fade. It festers. Everywhere I went, Clarion followed me in headlines, in emails, in conversations overheard at cafes. The acquisition had made national business news. Ethan Marwood was being celebrated as a visionary entrepreneur. The CFO, Denise Calder, had been promoted to a senior role at the parent company. The same people who'd erased me were now being toasted with champagne, and I couldn't stop thinking about that. Spreadsheet with my initials, the proof that my own reports had been altered to make the fraud look legitimate. That was the part that burned the most. They hadn't just fired me. They'd used me as cover. On the fifth night, I opened the folder again. I went through the files line by line, charting the alterations. It didn't take long to see the pattern systematic manipulation stretching back almost a year. Each quarter, the numbers got bolder, the deceptions cleaner. And every edit led back to the same internal usernames, d.calder and e.marwood. It wasn't just greed. It was strategy. At 2 a.m., I opened an encrypted email account, one I hadn't used since college, and began typing a message. 2. Redacted Proton Mail com subject. Clarion Systems, financial irregularities, confidential tip. I have documents showing falsified revenue data related to Clarion Systems. $500M acquisition by the Merida Group. Executives are involved. I can prove it. I stared at the blinking cursor, finger hovering over send, but I didn't, not yet. Whistleblowing isn't like in the movies, no swelling music, no clean victories. In real life, you lose things. Friends, reputation, safety. I'd seen what happened to others who tried to expose corruption. Companies bury them in lawsuits, brand them as disgruntled ex-employees or worse, make them disappear in silence. So instead I started small. I reached out to Lena Ruiz, a former colleague from the compliance department. She had left Clarion a few months before the acquisition, claiming she was tired of the politics. Lena was smart, discreet, and allergic to corporate nonsense. When I called, she didn't sound surprised to hear from me. "They finally cut you too?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, "and I think I know why." We met the next afternoon in a crowded cafe near the harbor, public enough to be safe, loud enough for privacy. I showed her snippets of what I'd found. As she scrolled through the data, her expression darkened. This isn't just aggressive accounting," she whispered. "This is fraud, Alex, real criminal fraud." "I know," I said quietly, "and they used my reports to do it." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, gulls circled over the gray water, the world moving on as if nothing had changed. "If this is real," Lena said finally, "then they've already covered their tracks. You can't go to HR, and if you go to the buyers directly, they'll bury you. So what do I do?" I asked. "You document everything. Make backups. And if you're serious about this, find someone outside the company who can't be bought." Her tone was calm, but I could hear the warning beneath it. That night, I encrypted the files and stored copies on 3 separate drives, one hidden in my apartment, one mailed to myself under a false name, and one uploaded to an anonymous cloud server. For the first time in days, I slept. Not peacefully, but with purpose. I didn't know where this path would lead, whether I'd be heard or destroyed, but one thing was clear. Clarion Systems had taken everything from me. Now, I was going to take something back. Over the next 2 weeks, Lena and I became ghosts. We met only in crowded places, coffee shops, libraries, train stations. I'd sit with my laptop while she scanned printed spreadsheets, scribbling notes in the margins like a student dissecting a forbidden text. Every time the door opened, both of us would look up. We never said it out loud, but we both knew. If Clarion found out what we were doing, things could turn ugly fast. At first, I thought what we'd uncovered was just a small patch of rot, a few falsified reports to boost the acquisition price. But the deeper we went, the clearer it became. This wasn't a patch. It was the entire structure. The fraud began subtly, about 14 months before the acquisition. Clarion's quarterly numbers had started slipping after a failed product rollout. Instead of reporting the downturn, the leadership team created ghost clients, fictional accounts supposedly representing overseas logistics partners. The fake contracts were then validated with self-generated invoices routed through a network of shell corporations. It was brilliant in a horrifying way. Money flowed in circles, real funds moving through fake entities to simulate healthy cash flow. On paper, Clarion looked like a rocket ship. In reality, it was burning from the inside out. Lena traced one of the fake accounts, Haven Ridge Global Logistics, to a PO box in Delaware. That same address, she discovered, was tied to a holding company controlled by a legal firm that happened to represent Ethan Marwood personally. "He didn't just know," Lena said, her voice tight. "He built the entire system." Each discovery felt like pulling another thread from a suit tailored out of lies. The more we unraveled, the more I realized how deliberate it all was. There were board minutes, compliance memos, even audit approvals, all forged or manipulated to maintain the illusion of legitimacy. And yet, The boldest part wasn't the fraud itself. It was how confidently they assumed no one would ever look too closely. After all, who questions success? The final piece fell into place when Lena decrypted a file buried in one of the CFO's archived folders. It was titled Project Silverline Final Package. Inside was the smoking gun, a presentation prepared for Merida Group, the company that had purchased Clarion for $500 million, slide after slide, detailed Clarion's exponential client growth, 95% revenue retention, and multinational partnerships. Every number, every chart, every projection was fabricated. Even the testimonial quotes were fake AI generated, lines attributed to non-existent executives. I scrolled through it in silence, each click heavier than the last. They sold an illusion, I whispered. A $500 million illusion, Lena replied. We both sat there, the weight of it sinking in. $500 million transferred on the strength of lies I had unknowingly helped build. Do you realize what this means? She said. If Merida Group finds out, this isn't just corporate fraud, it's international securities fraud. People go to prison for this. Unless, I said slowly, they make sure no one ever talks. The thought hung between us. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I received a call from an unknown number that went dead when I answered. A car idled outside my apartment one night longer than usual. Once, when I logged into my email, the system warned me of a suspicious sign-in attempt. Coincidences, maybe? Or maybe Clarion had realized that one of their ghosts had started whispering, but even as paranoia began to creep in, something inside me hardened. For years, I'd played the loyal employee, silent, obedient, invisible. They had counted on that. Now, I was done being invisible. We can't just sit on this, I told Lena. We need to go public. Not yet, she warned. You go too early, they'll bury you in legal fire. We need an ally, someone who can't be bought. Someone with reach. A journalist, I said. She nodded. That night, I started drafting an email to The Ledger, one of the country's top financial investigative outlets. One attached a few harmless documents as proof of contact. Nothing incriminating yet. When I hit send, I felt something shift. The fear was still there, but it had changed shape. It was no longer paralysis. It was motion. The illusion had made them rich. But now, it was about to make them visible. The journalist's name was Noah Kerrigan. He worked for The Ledger, a publication known for toppling billion-dollar companies with a single headline. I'd followed his work for years, the kind of stories that left executives sweating and PR teams scrambling. He replied to my email within a day. From nkerrigan@ledgerpost.com. Subject, Clarion Systems, confirming receipt, appreciate your courage in reaching out. If what you're saying is true, this could be significant. Let's meet off the record. Bring proof. The message was short, professional, but it carried the weight of something real. Someone finally believed me, or at least was willing to listen. Lena and I arranged to meet Noah in a quiet diner off the expressway. The kind of place that smelled like burnt toast and coffee that had been reheated too many times. He arrived right on time, mid-30s, sleeves rolled up, notebook in hand, eyes sharp but kind. He didn't waste time. Start from the beginning, he said. So I told him everything. The fake clients, the doctored ledgers, the spreadsheets with my forged initials. Lena filled in the compliance gaps, the legal gray areas, the shell companies, the falsified audits. Noah listened, silent, scribbling notes. Occasionally he'd nod, but mostly he just watched us. You have documents? He finally asked. Hundreds, I said. Financials, internal memos, contracts, signatures. And you're sure they're authentic? I created some of the originals myself, I said bitterly. Before they were rewritten. He sat back, exhaling. Then this isn't a leak, he said. It's a bomb. For the first time since the layoff, I felt something that almost resembled validation. All the nights of doubt, all the fear, it suddenly had purpose. But as we spoke, I noticed something that chilled me. A black SUV had pulled into the parking lot outside. It stayed there, engine running. No one got out. Lena noticed too. You expecting someone else? She murmured. No. Noah followed our gaze and frowned. Relax, he said quietly. Could be coincidence. But from now on, we don't meet here again, ever. We agreed to communicate through encrypted channels only. Noah would start verifying the documents, cross-referencing them with public filings and whistleblower reports. In exchange, he promised protection anonymity, legal resources, and the full power of the Ledger's investigative team. It sounded safe enough. But safety is an illusion. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. A text from an unknown number. You're making a mistake. Stop now. No signature. No context. Just that. The next morning, Lena's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, no cash, no electronics, no visible mess. Just the drawer where she kept her external hard drives left slightly ajar. They know, she said when she called me, her voice trembling. Someone's tracking us. How? Maybe one of the files. Maybe my email. I don't know. That day, we both wiped our devices, changed SIM cards, switched locations. The paranoia became our routine. Every stranger looked suspicious, every noise felt too close, but despite the fear, the work continued. Noah began sending updates, short, cryptic messages to avoid digital footprints. Numbers check out. Havenridge confirmed shell. Next step, trail the money. Each message was both a relief and a warning. The story was moving forward. And so was the danger. Then, a week later, I got an email from an old coworker, Mara, who still worked at Clarion. Subject: they're looking for you. Word is, legal suspects someone leaked data. They've hired a private firm to trace unauthorized downloads. They're saying you might have stolen proprietary information. Please be careful. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking. They weren't trying to scare me anymore. They were building a case. That night, I met Lena in an underground parking lot. Rain hammered the concrete, our voices low, urgent. They're coming after us, I said. Then we finish this before they can, she replied. We give Noah everything. I looked at the drive in my hand, the entire truth compressed into a few ounces of metal and code. Once I handed it over, there would be no going back. Let's end it, I said. She nodded. And together we walked into the storm. After we gave Noah the full data set, things moved fast, and then they stopped moving altogether. For a few days there was silence. No messages, no updates. Just the heavy stillness that comes when you've done something irreversible and the world hasn't caught up yet. Lena and I tried to act normal. We met in public places, used prepaid phones, switched apartments every few nights. But underneath every conversation was the same question neither of us could say aloud. Did we just sign our own destruction? On the 4th day, I got the email. No subject line. No sender name. Just one sentence. You've already been paid to disappear. My heart stuttered. I read it again and again. There was no signature, no traceable address, just emptiness. I forwarded it to Noah. Within minutes, he called. Don't respond, he said sharply. They're testing you. Trying to see if they can rattle you into a mistake. It worked, I muttered. You're protected now, he assured me. We've filed preliminary evidence with a federal contact. If anything happens to you, Clarion won't be able to bury it quietly. But protection on paper doesn't make you feel safe in real life. That night, I noticed a car idling outside my apartment again. Same model as before, black SUV, tinted windows. When I looked directly at it, the headlights flicked off. A few seconds later, it drove away. Coincidence, maybe. But the next morning, my door handle had faint scratches on it. Like someone had tried to force it open. Lena's situation was worse. Someone had called her office pretending to be a federal investigator, asking for her statement. When she realized it was fake, she panicked and unplugged her router. They're watching everything, she said when we met later that night, her voice breaking. Emails, calls, even Noah's messages, they could have people on the inside. Then we go dark, I said. Completely. We smashed our prepaid phones, bought new ones with cash, and used only one secure laptop for communication. Noah agreed to meet in person from now on, never in the same place twice. When we saw him again, his expression had changed. Gone was the confident reporter who'd spoken in facts and deadlines. This time he looked uneasy. They've started a counter-narrative, he said, pulling a folded document from his bag. It was a leaked internal memo from Clarion's legal team. My name was highlighted in red. Former employee terminated for misconduct. Unauthorized data breach under investigation. I felt the air drain out of my lungs. They're framing me. They're getting ahead of the story, Noah said. They know something's coming. This is damage control paint you as bitter and unstable before the truth hits. And it'll work, Lena whispered. People believe power before they believe victims. For a long time, none of us spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence between us. Then Noah leaned forward. Listen carefully. The evidence you gave me is solid. But if they spin it before I can publish, it'll look like a smear. We need one final piece, something irrefutable. Something that ties Ethan Marwood directly to the shell accounts. That's impossible, I said. Maybe not, Lena said slowly. Remember the encrypted ledger on the CFO's drive? It mentioned a private login, something only executives had. I turned to her, understanding dawning like cold light. If we can get that login, we can connect the fraud straight to Ethan, she finished. It was insane. Breaking into the system now after being labeled a criminal could destroy me, but doing nothing would let them win. One last dive, I said quietly. We find the login, get the proof, and send it to Noah. After that, we're done. She nodded, though her hands trembled. When I returned home that night, the apartment was dark. Too dark, I reached for the light switch and froze. On the kitchen table sat an unmarked envelope. Inside, a single printed photo. Me and Lena at the diner with Noah. No note. Just the image. The message was clear. They weren't warning me anymore. They were watching. The photo on my kitchen table haunted me. Not just because it proved I was being watched, but because of what it meant. They knew exactly how close we were to blowing everything open. By morning, Lena and I were gone. We packed our laptops, hard drives, and whatever cash we had left and drove east toward the coast. Noah arranged for a safe meeting spot in an old journalist retreat, a rundown guest house with flickering lights and creaky floors. We stayed there for 2 days. Sleeping in shifts, moving between paranoia and purpose. I spent hours combing through the encrypted drives again, chasing the last missing piece, the executive login that could connect Ethan Marwood directly to the shell company's. And then, sometime after midnight on the second night, I found it. Buried in a hidden folder within the CFO's archive was a subfile labeled aceline_exec portal. It was small, only a few kilobytes, too small for a spreadsheet or image. When I opened it, the screen filled with lines of encrypted text, each string beginning with the same prefix, EMARWD/auth. My breath caught. Ethan's personal login credentials. The system tag that authenticated every wire transfer tied to the fraudulent accounts. It was the final link. The one piece that would make the whole story undeniable. I sent a message to Noah. Got it. Uploading soon. He replied almost instantly. Meet me in 2 hours. Then we end this. When we arrived at the meeting point, an empty coastal cafe before dawn, Noah was already there. Laptop open, his expression taut. I handed him the drive. He plugged it in, scanned the data, and exhaled slowly. This is it, he said. You've just tied Marwood's signature to over 60 falsified transactions. There's no spinning this. What happens now? Lena asked. Now, he said, the world hears the truth. He uploaded the files through the ledger's secure server, a digital flood of evidence spilling into the hands of editors, analysts, and lawyers who had been waiting for the go-ahead. Once the upload completed, Noah turned his screen toward us. It's live, he said. Within an hour, phones started buzzing. Notifications. News alerts. Push headlines. $500 million tech acquisition built on fabricated data. Clarion Systems under federal review. CEO Ethan Marwood implicated in multinational fraud scheme. The story spread like fire. By noon, the stock price of Clarion's parent company had collapsed 40%. By evening, the news was everywhere. TV anchors dissecting the scandal. Investors demanding resignations. Regulators announcing formal investigations. Ethan Marwood's statement came late that night, polished, denying everything, calling it a coordinated attack by disgruntled ex-employees. But it was too late. The ledger had already published the receipts, ledgers, contracts, metadata trails, timestamps, everything pointing back to him, for the first time. A silence that had crushed me since my layoff broke wide open. My story, our story, had a voice, and it was echoing through every newsroom in the country. Still, the victory didn't feel clean. When I got back to the guest house, I found Lena staring at her phone, pale and trembling. "They leaked my address," she said quietly. "Someone posted it online?" My blood ran cold. The backlash had begun, not from the company, but from the faceless swarm that always follows public scandal. Anonymous threats, harassment, people calling us traitors, liars. Gold-diggers. Noah did what he could, arranged legal protection, temporary housing, media advisors. But even in safety, it didn't feel safe. Truth had freed us from silence, but it had also painted targets on our backs. 2 nights later, I stood alone on the beach outside the guest house. The wind was sharp, the sea black and endless. Behind me, the world was burning with a truth it had tried to bury. I thought about the years I'd given to Clarion, the loyalty, the exhaustion, the trust, all of it reduced to numbers and lies. But as the waves broke against the shore, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief, not peace, not yet, but the beginning of it. The truth was out. And for the first time, the people who built the illusion were finally the ones being watched. The story detonated across every channel like a chain reaction. For weeks, the headlines didn't stop. Every day brought a new revelation: offshore accounts, forged audits, fake client statements. Clarion Systems had been a house of mirrors, and now the mirrors were cracking one by one. The Department of Justice opened a formal inquiry. The acquiring company's board issued a statement distancing themselves from the fraudulent behavior of former Clarion executives. Translation: everyone was scrambling to save themselves. Ethan Marwood disappeared from public view. His lawyer spoke for him now, every sentence polished and hollow, every denial sharpened like glass. But I knew what the silence behind those statements meant. He was cornered. Noah's articles dominated the Ledger's front page for nearly a month. The evidence we'd gathered had become the backbone of an investigation that spanned 3 countries. Subpoenas, depositions, frozen assets, a slow, grinding kind of justice that didn't make for good television but mattered all the same. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt free. But mostly I felt empty. Everywhere I went, someone wanted something, another interview, another quote, another sound bite about courage in the face of corruption. They called me a whistleblower. A hero, but that wasn't how it felt. It felt like being peeled open, piece by piece, in public. Lena had already gone quiet. The harassment had gotten worse: anonymous callers, fake accounts spreading rumors, even a car parked outside her sister's house for 3 nights in a row. She called me one evening, her voice small and trembling. "I'm leaving the city," she said. "For how long?" "For good." I didn't argue. I understood. Some battles are worth fighting, but not at the cost of your sanity. Noah kept in touch, but he'd moved on to the next phase: federal cooperation. Interviews with prosecutors, follow-up stories. He was tireless. But when I saw him again months later, even he looked changed, older, maybe, or just worn out by the grind of exposing people who were supposed to be untouchable. "You know," he said, sitting across from me in a half-empty cafe, "the real story isn't what they did. It's what you risk to show it." "I didn't do it for a story," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "That's what makes it matter." Clarion's tower was almost empty now. Most employees had been reassigned or fired or simply disappeared into other companies under different names. The brand still existed on paper, but its reputation was radioactive. Sometimes I'd walk past the building just to see it. Once, it had been a monument to ambition, glass, steel, and light. Now, it was a tomb of flickering floors and half-lit signs. It struck me how fast the powerful fall when their lies lose the scaffolding of silence. But the fallout wasn't just theirs. It clung to me too, in whispered comments, side glances, job interviews that ended with polite refusals. Too controversial, one recruiter had said. Too much attention. I had told the truth, but the truth had burned my bridges along with theirs. Still, late at night, when I looked at the files saved on that encrypted drive, the data that started it all, I knew I'd make the same choice again, because somewhere, in all the noise and loss, was a strange kind of peace. I'd stopped letting fear dictate what I was worth, and even if the world moved on, I knew what really mattered, that the silence was broken, and it would never close around me again. When the official indictments came 6 months later, I didn't celebrate. I just watched the news quietly, a cup of cold coffee in my hands, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't clean, but it was real. And for now, that was enough. It's strange how life continues after catastrophe. One morning, you wake up and realize the world hasn't stopped. It's just learned to move around the wreckage. Nearly a year had passed since the Ledger broke the story. The trials were still dragging on, lawyers talking in circles, the press hungry for the next scandal. Clarion's name had become a synonym for greed, a case study in how far people would go to turn numbers into lies. Ethan Marwood had finally resurfaced, in court, pale and composed, hiding behind expensive suits and rehearsed remorse. His empire was gone, his investors scattered, but he still looked like a man who believed he'd rebuild. That was the thing about people like him. They didn't see destruction. They saw delay. I watched one of his hearings on a small cafe TV one afternoon. The reporter's voice buzzed over the static. Marwood faces up to 20 years for wire fraud, falsification of financial data, and obstruction of justice. 20 years. It sounded like justice, but it didn't feel like closure. Nothing could give back the years I'd given to his company. Nothing could fix the nights spent doubting myself, wondering if I'd done the right thing. Lena had started a new life in another city, teaching part-time, living quietly, far from the noise. We still spoke sometimes, but always briefly. The past had a gravity we didn't dare stay near for long. Noah's career had exploded. Awards, interviews, panels, he'd become the face of modern investigative journalism. He deserved it. But even he admitted the story had changed him. Once you see how deep corruption goes, he told me over a rare phone call, you stop being surprised by it. And that's the real danger, getting used to it. As for me, I never went back to corporate life. The interviews dried up, the offers came half-hearted, always with some version of, we admire your integrity, but... So I started something new, small, quiet, my own consultancy for ethical auditing. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. I spent my days helping smaller companies clean up their books, teaching them transparency the hard way I'd learned it. Sometimes, when I looked at the spreadsheets on my screen, I thought about the night I found the falsified data, the first clue that everything was a lie. It felt like another lifetime. A different version of me, naive and loyal and eager to please. Now I work slower. I asked more questions. I trusted less, but I also slept better one evening. As the sun dipped behind the city skyline, I walked past Clarion's old headquarters. The building was half empty now, sold to another firm, the logo long removed. Only the faint outline of the old name remained. Clarion Systems, like a ghost, burned into the glass. I stood there a long time, listening to the wind whip through the alley. I thought about the people who'd lost everything. The ones who'd lied, the ones who'd stayed silent, and the ones like me who had finally refused to, for months. I had carried the weight of what I'd done, the guilt, the fear, the constant ache of being the one who broke the illusion. But standing there, I realized something simple and devastating. Telling the truth doesn't ruin things. It reveals what was already broken. And once you see the cracks, you can't unsee them. I turned away from the building, the ghost of its name fading behind me. The air was sharp, the sky streaked with gold. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small or angry or afraid. I just felt free, the silence that had once swallowed me. Whole was gone, replaced by something stronger, quieter and infinitely harder to break. Truth, it had cost everything. But it had given me back myself.